Good morning. We'll call the meeting to order. We respectfully acknowledge that the Township of Algonquin Highlands is located on Treaty 20 Mississauga territory and in the traditional territory of the Mississauga and Chippewa Nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations. We also acknowledge a historic shared presence of other Indigenous nations throughout the area. We recognize these original inhabitants as the stewards of its lands and waters since time immemorial. Could I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the agenda for February 5th? Deputy Mayor Dayu and Councillor Shortreed.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Dayu, seconded by Councillor Shortreed. Be it resolved that the February 5th, 2026 meeting agenda be approved as circulated.
All in favor? That's carried. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof today? Seeing none, could I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the minutes of January the 15th? Councillor Shortreed, Councillor Barry,
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, seconded by Councillor Barry. Be it resolved that the January 15th, 2026 public and regular council meeting minutes be approved as circulated.
all in favor? That's carried. We have no public meetings today, delegations or presentations. So next is the consent agenda. Had anyone requested items to be removed? Then could I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the consent agenda, please? Deputy Mayor Dayu, Councillor Shortreed.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Dayu, seconded by Councillor Shortreed. Be it resolved that items listed under the consent agenda are considered routine and acted in one motion. Each matter of business contained in the consent agenda is recorded separately in the minutes of the meeting, and that Council approves the February 5th, 2026 consent agenda and hereby adopts the staff reports and all recommendations contained therein and directs staff to proceed with all necessary administrative actions.
All in favor? That's carried. So next up is building and bylaw and a discussion about septic reinspection. Good morning, Mr. Moore.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. The report is basically outlined to discuss the deficiency of a staff member that we needed to pull this program off well, more efficiently than what we're going to end up realizing. What we have is, to refresh council's memory, September 2025, we proposed a septic reinspection program that council adopted. Is to be done in-house. It's to be a perpetual program. And it was based on a cycle in staff size of somewhere around 5 years. Which would require a dedicated staff member to the program. We went out twice and we were unsuccessful. So we're going to belay the going back out for now. Staff are committed to continuing on with council's wishes, and we're going to start the program in-house with current staff. It is going to affect the amount of inspections that we realize, which could affect the overall cycle, but it's not going to be terrible. And in 2027, council's wishes will reevaluate. Carry on.
Well, thank you. It's disappointing that 2 rounds of competition would, be unsuccessful, but I'm glad to hear that you feel that we can move forward with the program, acknowledging that it might take a little longer than, what we were looking at for a 5-year cycle. Look to council for any comments or questions. Deputy Mayor Dayu.
So if this were to become the norm, for example, and I recognize that's not what you're proposing, but say it did, what would the cycle be? Would it be 6 years, 7 years? What would be reasonable?
Yes, thank you. And through you, Madam Mayor, we don't have a handle on that yet. I'm envisioning possibly 10. Because I expect that building permits will start to get on the rise again, and it's going to become increasingly more difficult for us to do both jobs. But certainly, I expect to bring a report back later on in the year with our numbers, and then I'll have a better gauge on that. If worst case scenario, to your point, yeah.
Yeah, I would hate to see it extended to that degree. I really would. I think we'd have to reevaluate the direction that we were going to take.
Yeah.
If that was the case, but I think it'll take a year, at least the first year, maybe the second year as well, to get a better idea about how long it'll take. Any other questions or comments? Deputy Mayor Dayu?
So in previous conversations, we discussed various methods about going about these cycles, and the preferred method has been everyone gets inspected every 5 years, regardless of whether you've got your Rolls-Royce 2024 model or whether you've got a much older model. Do you think there is a rationale to perhaps look at a slightly different method wherein you choose the older models to to prioritize inspection, or whichever ones came up as deficient in the past, rather than potentially letting them delay for a lot longer? Or does that just throw a wrench into your system?
I think I'll respond to that. We've had that discussion already and decided that we would go in the direction that we decided. And I think it will take a little bit of time for staff to work their way through it, see how things are going, and we can revisit that, if we think we need to make a change.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none, then could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report and move in the direction that's recommended? Councillor Short-Reed, Councillor Richards.
Moved by Councillor Short-Reed, seconded by Councillor Richards. Be it resolved that Council receives report BLDG 00226 regarding an update on the septic reinspection program for information, and that Council concurs with staff's recommendation of postponing the hiring of a dedicated septic inspector for 2026, with the staffing to be evaluated in 2027.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you, sir. Next up, Parks, Recreation and Trails. Morning, Mr. Card.
Good morning, Mayor and Council.
First item is the Christmas tree survey responses.
Correct. So responses report is added to this for everybody to see. Had some great responses, got 35 in total. As council's aware, the options were a proposed existing tree, which is just inside the gate of the park, or to plant a new tree. Votes are in favor of the existing tree, 23 votes for existing, 12 votes in favor for planting a new tree. Additionally, as council recalls, we reached out and engaged the Dorset Heritage Museum Committee, particularly in relation to the plaque that existed at the tree that's there now, and asking them if they want to be involved in the replacement of that plaque and help advise on that, as well as a dedication ceremony for future trees. So at that meeting, and council saw their minutes at the last council report, they were able to provide the broken remnants of the previous plaque. And I've got the wording that was on that plaque here. And at the same time, they're recommending that that plaque be replaced as is at this time. They also wanted to say that they are against the proposed white pine that everyone is, the majority of votes have been in favor of, and that they'd want to wait to see if there's further discussion required from them following the results of this report. So looking for some direction on council if they want to include the Heritage Museum in more of that discussion. Whether or not we go with the proposed tree in favor of the votes and the existing plaque replacement now as is, as recommended by the committee.
I don't think there's any question about replacing the plaque, you know, that's a given. Quite honestly, if they didn't like the existing tree, they, you know, take part in a survey, you know, make your votes count. But I guess I'd look to council for comments about the direction to go in. I know there was one thought that the existing tree is the wrong kind of tree. There was a comment that we plant another, you know, traditional Christmas style tree in the park and let it grow for future use, but comments? Councillor Shortreed.
I think we're okay keeping the tree as it is and planting a new one for the future because that tree, I don't think is going to survive a long time. Right?
Well, and quite honestly, in the meantime, I would like to see them both lit up. I
Yeah.
know that the one is a big Charlie Brown style tree, but you know, I don't see any harm in lighting them both up and just kind of keeping the memories of the old tree there. Other comments, Councillor Barry?
I kind of like the idea of planting a new tree that will grow and use the existing tree that has been recommended by staff. I think right now, the shape and size and type of tree will work, but I do think in the long term, a different tree is what I've heard through the community is what they're after.
So the
And I-
question is, where do we plant another tree? If that's the direction that we decide to go in. You know, I do see, there was some discussion earlier on about, you know, tearing out the initial tree. To me, that's a lot of disruption. And it's not dead yet. So, you know, I'm just kind of wondering about thoughts about if we're going to plant another, you know, tree to grow and thrive, where that might go. Deputy Mayor Dayu?
My question, I suppose, to Chris or maybe even to Council Shortreed is what the reservation was, the strong reservation was against the proposed white pine. And if those are thoughts that we could integrate into our planning, I do agree. I think this is a good opportunity to plant a new one for the future. It can be smaller, it can be cheaper because it's smaller. So that I think really works out. The question though is, what is it about the white pine?
It traditionally wasn't the correct shape. You know, it wasn't the, you know, traditional shape of a Christmas tree. I think that was the main gist of the comments that I saw. And anything other that you had heard? Go ahead, Chris.
I wasn't present at the meeting. Our rec coordinator was there, but at what I had heard from her and what I saw in the minutes was that they felt as it grows, it will become gangly. Certainly, yes, white pines have the tendency to, they grow tall and they spread their limbs out at the top as they mature. And I think no matter what we do, at every certain period, a new tree is going to have to be considered. So to have some sort of consideration of the next tree after that, certainly, but yeah, at some point in the future, that tree will also no longer be the best tree and we'll have to move on from that. And that's the nature of using natural growing trees. But they felt that their wording was it will become gangly as it grows taller.
Any other thoughts or questions? Councillor Shortreed?
And that's just coming from the museum committee, arborist commission.
That it's going to grow gangly. Okay, well, I mean, I guess we can go with the recommendation from the survey. And maybe what you could do, Chris, in the meantime is give some thought to or come back with some recommendations about where we might plant a new tree. Does that sound agreeable to everyone? Councillor Shortreed?
I think the museum had a bit of a recommendation in between the gazebo walkway into the park and the gate that's closest to the existing tree, somewhere in that area.
I'm having a hard time envisioning that right now. But, you know, possibly you can come back with a recommendation on that, Chris. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Would council like me to have this discussion with the committee?
Sure, but, you know, Deputy Mayor Dayu, then Councillor Short-Reed.
There's certainly no harm in that, but honestly, choices are going to be few and far between because we need to think about visibility and accessibility and electricity. And one of the prime spots is already taken by the current tree. So I don't think it's going to be a grand old debate. I think a smaller tree of the right type, and I would agree the white pine is probably not the right type.
It'll
in-
do it for now.
in the right location. Well, but there are lots of trees. There are lots of different types of trees.
No, I'm just saying that they've made a recommendation. We'll go with the existing tree for now.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. But for the new tree, the right type in the right location will be pretty simple to determine. Yeah.
We'll look to you to come back with a recommendation about the location and, you know, if we hear any contrary comments after that, well, I guess we'll have to deal with them. Any other comments or questions? So can I have a mover and a seconder then to go forward with the receive the report and go forward with the recommendation? Councillor Short-Reed, Councillor Richards.
Moved by Councillor Short-Reed, seconded by Councillor Richards. Be it resolved that Council receives Parks, Recreation and Trails Report PRT 00226 regarding Dorset Community Christmas Tree Survey results for information. And that Council directs staff to proceed with the dedication of the existing proposed Christmas tree for the 2026 ceremony. And that Council directs staff to replace the broken existing plaque, like for like, with location to be determined at a later date by the Dorset Heritage Museum Committee. And finally, that Council directs staff to engage the Dorset Heritage Museum Committee for collaboration on a dedication ceremony at the new tree.
All in favor? That's carried. Next is a discussion on the log chute and the engineer's review. I can't tell you how excited I was to see the positive approach to this. So if you'd like to give us your report.
Yes, so as everyone's aware, the detailed report from the engineer is attached. So I'm not going to go through that in detail, but I did essentially summarize that in the report. And so I'll go through that, so I'll some considerations, and then looking for direction on which portions to go ahead with, if that's the desired approach, and timelines. So it was split into 3 sections, and starting at the dam being section 1, and then section 2 being the middle, and section 3 being the furthest from the dam. Section 1, as we had anticipated, is in fair condition. Approximately 50% requires repair or replacement. The word approximate's used a few times when we're talking about those percentages, and just to explain that a little bit from the engineering perspective is it's recognizing that as you get into a project where you're replacing wooden components, we can identify which components are definitely rotted, but as you get into removing pieces and putting new pieces in, on-site decisions need to be made at those times as the construction happens, just depending on what's happening. So when we say 50%, we can say, yes, 50% is actually beyond life and rotted out and needs replaced. Whether or not you need to get into other portions as you replace those would happen on site. So that's why we use the word approximation. Section 2 is non-existent. It's the gap between the 2 sections that has broken out and washed away. And then there's also a large deep void present there where the fill material existed. So that section would be a 100% replacement if we'd like to go that route. Section 3 furthest from the dams in overall poor condition, and that would require an approximate 80% repair replacement. For the most part, any portions that are salvageable are on the floor of the chute and in the foundational structure of the chute. It's the wall sections that are the most rotted, which is common when you see wood that's wet and dry. Those portions are the ones that rot out the most compared to portions that are always wet, tend to last longer. They did highlight that something to consider throughout this project and for any future complete rebuilds is that there's no foundation pinning or anchor system to pin the structure to the rock there or the substrate. So that'd be something they're recommending for consideration for any future work. They've given several options as far as costing goes, so I'll give an overview of that. And so to repair section 1, $67,000 plus a 40% engineering contingency. That contingency amount is considering if you went with multiple portions at the same time, it would then change the contingency amount for the engineering for the other portions. If we were only to go to with one portion, let's say, for example, the repair of section 1 only, it would be 20% on engineering on top of the
Just say
construction
40%
costs.
sounds like a pretty high contingency.
Yeah. And if it were 40 for that, you'd see the other two sections are lower at 15, and that's considering if you did it all at once. So if you're going with just the one, it'd be 20%. The engineer did also say that these are considered upset estimates, high level estimates. They're also what they call Class D estimates, which is construction estimation terminology, which essentially says it's only for budget consideration. Final numbers would happen. We wouldn't really know until we go through the tender process when we get actual bids. But they'd consider these to be at the high end of what they'd expect for the actual construction work to be done. Now these costs don't include any costs that we may need to incur for water level controls from Parks Canada. Remembering that Parks Canada has said that very specific seasonal timelines of when they can do shutoffs can't be guaranteed. What they'd ask that we do is put in an application for water shutoff once we know we want to go ahead with any work. And then as we move towards that date, they would then be able to better advise on what's required and exactly when. So they need flexibility from the contractor. Other two options, replace section 2, 155,000, and then repair of section 3 at 104,000. And of course, full replacement is still an option where they're estimating 550,000. And I've just put here that our current reserve account balance for the log chute's $276,574. And what I'd be looking for here is deciding which kind of direction we want to go with which options. From there, I'd be going back to the engineer. And the next steps would be going through design and tendering to facilitate an open bid process and decide on timelines.
Thank you. This has been, I'm just going to make a couple of comments before we get into it. I'm sure we'll have a healthy discussion about this. This has really been a long time coming. We've asked several times for work to be done and we haven't been able to really go ahead with anything. I have several concerns, about, I would love to see the first section rebuilt. We've got the money in reserves to do that. It wouldn't create us, any challenges with respect to the budget. I'm a little concerned about the fact that Parks Canada have said that at some point in time, they will be possibly moving the location of the dam, which kind of puts a bit of a hitch in our giddy up. So building the entire dam might be problematic if in the end they move the location of the dam. I'm very concerned about it. I know that there are, work and timeline restrictions for staff. I really would like to see this project go ahead this year, if at all possible. I'd like council to consider that because we have no idea what the new council will support. And this is something that our council has been asking to be worked on for a long time, and the money's in place to work on section 1. Now, I'm not sure, Chris, if we need to balance that against other projects that you've considered for the year. or whether we need outside help, or, I don't know what maybe say Brian's involvement might be in helping you through this process, or, Adam's department. That's for you guys to work out, but, I'd like to hear council's thoughts about, the timeline and the section that we look at. Councillor Barry.
I have a few questions and comments, but I guess my first question is in regards to the water being shut off. Just judging from the photos from the engineer's report, it looks like the water was shut off for the engineering work that's been done. So what was the process involved in that?
So we were fortunate in that case in that after that last time we were discussing it with council, I reached out to them once I had the engineer on board for dates, and I said, we need to get in there. Can we get a water shut off? And they said, right now is perfect timing. And we have people heading over there next week. And if you can be there next week at 2:00, so can we. And they shut it off, and they came back 2 hours later and turned it back on, and it was no cost to us. And when I had my meeting with them about this consideration originally, that's the nature of it. As we know, it was a drought year. Water was low. There was hardly any water flowing anyways. They already had people in the area and they were willing to help us out. It depends on how much water there is in the system. And, they've said averages percentage wise would be aim for June. And then costs, when I said, how much does it cost? They said, it depends on how much needs to be done, because if there's a lot of water flowing through the system, to shut off water there for, let's say, a 2-week construction timeline might require them to adjust half a dozen dams or more, or it might require them to adjust dams from the top of the system right on down, and then that adds cost.
Carry on.
And then I'm in support of option 1 initially. I guess my one reservation with that is in the report, it says that this is for, I think it's a 5 to 10 year proximity of lifespan. Is that 5 to 10 years just we've done the engineer work and we're walking away, or is that is there a maintenance plan associated with that?
Go ahead.
So I'm glad you brought that up, because I wanted to get to that as the discussion went on, but you'll see in the report that I've recommended that as we go through this process, we also develop an inspection and maintenance program. And I could see it being similar to probably the Dorset Tower, where you get biannual engineer inspections, and then they make recommendations on repairs, and then you make those repairs based on those recommendations. We did have quite a lengthy chat about the longevity of it, and the engineer did say that they put the 5 to 10 year time frame. That's based on their experience, but it's also extremely challenging to predict, because you're dealing with new components attaching them to old components that are already half rotted, and how quickly that rotting happens in between is you can't really calculate. You'll just have to watch it every couple of years and work on it. But they expect that in general, whatever we do now, they're advising that, yes, this is a 5 to 10 year solution. So it's really a matter of, as soon as we finish this, we're having the discussion about what happens in 10 years from now.
Well, I'm glad to hear, the recommendation about a regular inspection program, because I think that's something that we had hoped would take place in the past, and we just, it's one of those things that's kind of fallen off the ledge. But, if we're going to have this expenditure, I think that, we need to be careful, a careful eye on it, and, knowing what we're going to face going forward. Councillor Barry, and then Deputy Mayor Dayu.
I'll ask this and then.
Pardon me?
I'll ask this and then I'll.
You can ask
take a
all the
break.
questions you
Okay.
need.
The next question is, in the discussion and having the engineers there, was it discussed that the dam itself is due for some construction? And could the repair be constructed in a way that could be easily, I don't know, shored up to the new infrastructure that's put there? I don't know if I'm asking that question correctly, but. I'm not an engineer, but I think, do you understand the question?
The problem is that there's no guarantee that the dam is going to be in the same location. And, I think there was a suggestion that, and I'm not sure how attached the log chute is to the dam itself, but whether construction could be done in a way that it would be easily separated from the dam if, say, the dam was going to move. But that's a question, that we'd have to take back to the engineer. Go ahead, Chris.
So I've certainly made them aware of all of the discussions we've had with Parks Canada and the challenge with the timelines associated with that. They understand that. They did not look at the structure of the dam at all to be able to comment on that. That's outside of the scope of the review. We did note though, and I'm just looking at the photos, they're on page 4, figure 2 is it notes severe erosion and undermining at the interface between the dam and the log chute. And yes, the log chute does essentially dovetail into the dam, and work to that dovetailing does need to be done at the same time as if we're replacing section 1, and that'd probably be concrete parging type work. I've also let them know that a potential outcome for down the road when we move to a full replacement, if that's what we go towards, that we'd be looking for a structure that has as much longevity as possible. So we've already started to, they're already aware and started to kind of throw around some ideas as to what might be possible for a rebuilt structure that has some sort of like steel framing support that would allow the structure to have more longevity. So we're already thinking about that. But this would be a, replace section 1. We still have absolutely no idea when or what's going to happen with the dam, and it could happen in the 7-year time frame. We don't know.
Or next year. You're right. We just don't know. I just, I feel very strongly about the log chute. I confess to that. But, it is an important cultural asset and we don't have an awful lot of them. Certainly it's unique in its nature and I think that I recently heard that it had been named as one of the 7 wonders of Haliburton County. And, that puts importance on it in itself. People love the log chute and I'm, we've heard an awful lot of comment come out of the Halls Hawk area that how important it is to them and how much they want to see it repaired. And, if we've got the ability and the funds to repair the first section, if we need to do fundraising in the future, I'm sure that there can be a mechanism established to do that going forward. Deputy Mayor Dayu.
Thanks, Chris. 2 questions. The first being, if we were to only go about repairing section 1 this year, was there any consideration budgetarily for the removal of the jumble of logs in section 3 that might be posing more risk than anything else while the water is shut off? And I don't know, could some of those logs be retained for reapplication further down the line? I'm not sure, but there is that mishmash jumble of logs further down that it would be really good to clean up and to see that as part of the budget rather than just repairing the front end. So that's question number 1. Question number 2 is, what is your sense after having spent some time with these engineers about their ability to maintain the current character of the log chute? You're talking about steel framing, which sounds very robust, but also quite scary from a cultural authenticity perspective. So do you have any sense of what would have to change visually in order to make this thing stick?
So for question 1, removals, yes, any of this, whatever we went with, and let's say we're going with option 1 for just the first section, that would include the removal of the other sections. We did discuss whether or not logs could be kept from certain portions and used on other portions. That's not impossible. The costing they've given us is replacing anything that needs replaced with new. But those types of decisions are ones that can be made by somebody who's experienced in woodworking. and they could be on-site decisions that we could say we're looking for. The one engineer who was there, he just by virtue of where he grew up, and his father does woodworking and he builds furniture, and he said, you know, like, I've seen my dad, you know, you can plane this type of wood and get sections out of center pieces of rotting timbers. But that takes the correct skill set, and it takes the correct mindset and the correct person. If we wanted to do that, we'd work that into our tender process, that we're looking for that kind of review. And it's certainly possible. Yeah.
Counselor, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and as far as maintaining the second question about maintaining the visuals of it. So for this portion of it, it would be replacing like for like. So it would look the same as it does right now. We'd look at opportunities to pin it to the rock. They do feel that there's a big opportunity for improving the longevity of it by pinning it to the rock, so that it's not free floating. What exactly a new structure would look like, we haven't talked exactly about that. It was only along the lines of discussions we've all had about whether or not you could build something out of steel and clad it with wood, that type of mindset, knowing that any wooden structure, be it even a deck on our own houses, generally has a 12 to 15 year lifespan. And how sustainable is it to look at a $550,000 plus replacement on a 12 to 15 year lifespan? I'd like to talk to them about, could we build a structure that lasts 50 years? And then what does the life cycle maintenance look like of that? And then plan for that. And the first thing they said is, what if we built the foundation out of steel, and the side girdles out of steel, and everything else is made out of wood? Well, I said, it's, you know, once we go down that path, if we want to, we'll want to look at design options, but those are the possibilities.
But even using steel in some ways, you could still maintain, you know, the historic look of the log chute. I'm like to hear from Councillor Richards.
Well, fortunately, most of my fellow counselors have asked a majority of my questions. But I like actually the overall replacement value. It's a lot lower than my own expectations had been. And perhaps that's because it's like or like, and not considering building something with more structure and longevity to it, like steel framing. I was thinking veneered in wood to give it that authenticity, but allow its longevity to be much greater than what we've faced, because it does get a lot of water, a lot of rushing through it. There's flooding issues. There's, you know, ice, you know, damming issues, and ice falling and trees falling. There's all kinds of hazards to this thing in the area. But it definitely, I think, the cultural icon of Algonquin Highlands, and certainly beloved by the community. If we were to just go with replacing section 1, or doing the repairs to section 1, understanding that the rest would be just removed, so it would only be that section. Can we, do you think it's realistic to put this out for tender and get this done this year? Do you think we'll have commitment to do that? And can we do that today, or do we need to wait for budget, like to put this out to tender right away?
We have the money in reserve to do at least section 1. Not, I don't believe, to do the entire log chute, but you know, it's not a budgetary consideration at this point in time. Not in my belief, given that we've got the money to do section 1 in reserves, out of reserve. Sorry, Chris.
Yeah, if I may speak to timelines of the project. If we go, the next step would be going back to the engineer and saying, we want to go ahead, start your engineering. Typically, best case scenario, you're going to have a draft back in 8 to 10 weeks. And then you're going maybe back and forth a couple of times on a draft. You finalize that draft, then we'd move into developing the tender documents. That typically takes the same kind of time frame, 8 to 10 weeks. From there, we post the tender. We have to do that for a minimum of 3 weeks based on our purchasing policy. Generally, for projects of this scale, I find to facilitate having site meetings and to get well-informed bids, to go more with a 4 to 5 week posting is best. You get those bids back, you review those. If there's any budget considerations that need to be considered at that time, bring that back to council. Once we go through that process, if we approve a bid, there's several weeks of going back and forth on just finalizing contract documentation and then moving into construction. If I were able to go back to the engineer right after this meeting and say, get working on it, I would picture potentially tendering in July or August. If all of those timelines worked out, we'd maybe be having a discussion at council about the results of the tender in August. And then you'd have to develop a construction timeline from there, aiming for probably September, October, November, if everything worked out. Knowing that we also have to consider water levels and working with Parks Canada, and knowing that they've already asked us that there needs to be some flexibility, and they've asked that when we're working with contractors to discuss the ability to be flexible for timelines. So that would play into that as well. And of course, there needs to be environmental permitting. Where that falls with timing, I wouldn't know until the engineers go through all of the permitting process. But that's to say that if we gave them the go ahead as soon as I leave this meeting, best case scenario would be a fall construction work.
Well, I think you are hearing that we, council can correct me if I'm wrong, that we would like this to happen this year. And that, you know, I think that we can hope that we can sort of proceed with a little urgency, you know, and convey that message to the engineers. You know, because, you know, to go through all of this work and find out that it's going to be bumped into 2027 with a new council who may or may not have the same level of concern or desire, you know, I'd really like to see us, and we have to be very careful that we don't run ourselves into a lame duck situation. So I believe some urgency is called for. Councillor Richards.
Yeah, just given that it needs an 80% reconstruction, is there any thought to, and I know it's gonna complicate it, doing a full replacement of section 1 with that steel framing and veneering, or is that just gonna delay it way too much at this stage? And so we should just repair what we got. And is there anything in our I think that the value of this would be beyond our single source procurement for this, so we would definitely have to put it out for tender. Is that correct? Or given the complexity of it, you know, would it be best to just go straight with
Sole sourcing.
sole sourcing in the original constructor of the project?
Go ahead, Kristen. We may need some comment from our acting CAO.
Sure. To the first question, so just to clarify, section 1 is a 50% replacement. It's section 3 that's an 80% replacement. And it would be replacing components just as is. So when we were talking about that, the engineer brought up aesthetics as well, and thinking about, you're going to end up with a structure that has brand new pieces of wood alongside of existing wood. That's what it's going to look like. So again, to relate it to similar to like I guess a deck situation, is you're just replacing boards that need replaced on the deck. So that wouldn't include any steel framing or anything like that. The sole or single sourcing, there are options and provisions in the purchasing policy, as council's aware about that. I don't have the wording right in front of me because there's some complexities and some idiosyncrasies with it, but generally it's in situations for emergencies, or in situations where the nature of the work is such that there's only one company or few companies who have the ability to provide the services needed.
It is a unique project, and I'm glad that you brought that up because that might help to speed the process up a bit. Any comment from yourself?
Just related to the single source procurement, that's when there's multiple vendors that could provide the same service. But the one caveat to that is if there's a vendor that has the service or skills that were related to the existing knowledge of the nature and service, that's one of the requirements for a single source. And a sole source is more for, there's only one particular company out there that could actually do that work.
Councillor Berry? Then
I
Councillor Shortreed.
wouldn't mind knowing what it would cost. Like, I will agree that I think Councillor Richards said the prices did come in less than anticipated. I would be interested to know if steel or a more, something with longer longevity was considered, how that could impact possibly the budget, like for this
Well, and the
project
timeframe.
and the timeframe. And the other thing is if council is in support of going forward and having that project completed in this year, if we've given that direction, say now, or maybe one more round with the engineer, does that affect anything with the lame duck? If we've given the direction today, or
I don't think so at this point in time, but I guess we'd have to look for further advice on that.
If council approve the project, and it's included in your budget, yes, it's coming from reserves, but it's going to be in the budget acknowledged, then you're okay if there's lame duck.
Well, and the other issue too is our ability to do the work. I mean, what impact it's going to have on staff time on other projects and what we might be able to do to mitigate that. You know, whether we, you know, have to say, okay, this other project that we were considering could wait till next year because there isn't, you know, the urgency, or who else can we lean on to provide the support that you might need. But it does sound like maybe we could go forward with sole source. I guess what we need to do today, and correct me, Dawn, if I'm wrong, but you know, if we authorized staff to proceed with the project, obviously some information will have to come back to us, but that could like get the ball rolling, and hopefully we could get it done in a timely way within this year. Oh, I'm sorry, Chris, I'm just going to go to Councillor Shortreed.
Just one thought and one question. My one thought is, since it's one of the 7 wonders of Halliburton County, would we be able to get extra money from the MAT tax to support this over the years?
I'm not sure where the MAT tax stands, and that would be, you know, a report that we would ask from finance.
But
For like we can use our portion of the MAT tax
I
for
mean, their part of their portion, more. I'm asking.
the
for more.
county's portion.
Yeah. Since it is a tourist heritage.
The county
Seven
has
wonder.
already passed their budget. I don't,
There's a thought.
yeah,
But my question goes back to the underpinning. So if there is no underpinning, is that already included in the pricing, or are we gonna be over that?
It's not included in the current pricing, no. And if I may, in addition, just thinking about longevity and Councillor Berry's question about, you know, could you do some steel there as well on section 1? I think it would make sense to, knowing that what Parks Canada has told us is it's reasonable to assume that the dam would be replaced in the next 15 years. Tell the engineer to work with that number. We need something that's going to last until at least the replacement, so that we can then have a plan in place for the new log chute when the replacement happens. And I picture the dam replacement happens, the section that we work on now ends up going away, and then we put in the whole entire new log chute when the new dam goes in. That can be more of a discussion, but that give me something to give them to work on. When we talk about structural engineering, they like to talk in years and timelines, and it's the types of discussions we have about landings as well, where you can say, give us a structure of the last 20 years. What does that look like? Give us a structure of the last 15 years. What does that look like? And then they can advise on that. And if council wants, I can certainly give them that information, and they put that into the design work. If I can, just about capacity, within the township and the department for the project, is I find it challenging to say exactly, whether or not we're going to be able to pull it off in the year. Certainly the budgets we're all proposing are what we feel is manageable within the year. And what I typically do in managing multiple projects, and certainly the project manager is going to be in on this, is it's another ball in the air. So there's multiple balls in the air, multiple projects moving forward at the same time. At the end of the year, council often will see some things that we weren't able to get to and other things that we were able to get through. As council's aware, there's several projects that have been kind of year over year that we're not able to get to, that those are generally the ones that are lower priority that end up being shuffled to the bottom year after year. Or in a year, for example. So the best I could say is we put the ball in the air, we start working on it, and we keep all of the balls in the air and get as many of them done as we can by the end of the year.
Well, and yeah, I guess I would like to hear that there's some priority that would be placed on this, given how important we feel this project is. And if that maybe during the budgeting process, there can be some discussion about priorities of projects. Not necessarily associated with funding, but with the amount of work that's associated with it. Councillor Richards?
I just want to make a little comment about some of the commentary about an incoming council perhaps not agreeing. I would certainly hope, given the importance of this log chute to our entire community and how much it's supported by the community, that an incoming council that wouldn't make this decision would be unelectable. And I do believe that our community would not allow that to happen. But it is a situation that we have that it's deteriorating, it's falling apart, it's already flowing downstream. It's well past us doing something about it. We have the money in reserves from when it was damaged by the insurance. So there's no reason to not go ahead and get this done if we can. I would also hope, though, that if we're considering doing whatever, to make it last even longer than a potential replacement in 10 years, if we can, not to complicate it further, but at least by allowing the longevity of that first section, so that visitors to the area still have a log chute to come visit, and it doesn't completely wash away and we have nothing there, I think is the right course of action. But it's continued longevity in the money we are putting into it. We should do the best that we can to make it last as absolutely long as possible. Not just do this now and then completely replace it again. So if we can make this work for longer than 10 years, great. If that means disconnecting it from the current dam to make that more structurally sound, great.
There is some financial flexibility for us, over and above what they've quoted for the first section.
Yeah.
And it might be something that we can build into once the detailed work is done by the engineers, that could be an option that we could see, okay, how much more is this going to cost? And, whether we want to consider that, because I can see the value, and if we're going to do the work on it, let's make it last as long as it can and make it as stable as it can be.
Mhm.
Deputy Mayor Dayu?
I agree, but I also believe that longevity budget and visuals share a delicate balance. I'm sure we could put money into a 70-year structure, but it would not look authentic to what was there 100 years ago at all. If we, in our search for longevity, have to make decisions that change the authenticity of the final product, I think we've got to bring that back for conversation. Anyone, engineers, non-engineers alike, heritage people, non-heritage people alike, can spot a fake a million miles away. Like, it's if it's full of steel with a little bit of wood cladding, people are going to think, oh, well, this isn't it at all. And that's not what we're after either. So it's that very delicate balance that we're going to have to find.
Point well taken. I mean, we do want it to look authentic. And when you talk about steel, like I think foundation, that it's not necessarily something that's going to scream at you, but that we should be able to do the replacement, including, some steel foundation, and have it look authentic. Like that would be my desire as well. So, I'm sure you've had those discussions with the engineers, or can continue those discussions. I'll go to Councillor Barry and then back to you, Chris.
I do agree with what Councillor Dayu's saying. I also think that just given the history of the log chute, in over the last 100 years, and with this project and what's happened, and the length of work that's going to be needed and maintained over the next years, I think having some of that as like it's a cultural asset, but I also think it's an educational asset as well. So by having some of that maybe less aesthetic structure incorporated, it gives the viewer an opportunity and a greater story of what has happened and what needs to be done for longevity reasons. So I don't want to throw out that as an option. Ironically, when I was at Roma, I went to one of the sessions that was on the importance of culture in a community. And they were saying there that for every dollar that we spend on culture, there's $25 that comes back to your community, whether it be through accommodation or meals or whatnot. And that some of our cultural assets should be considered cultural infrastructure, which is kind of what we're having the discussion. And then the session actually went on further to discuss like the health and social benefits of these assets within the community. So I think that it's important to, have that aesthetic. I mean, I'm an artist myself, but I also think it's an opportunity to show the process, and maybe because we have been continuing to put I think it was $5,500 in a reserve over the years, and the money that we already have there from insurance, maybe having in the near future, a committee of council or a ad hoc group that could see this project go on further. I agree with Councilor Richards that hopefully the newly elected council has this as a priority, but you never know. So I think by having some of those things in place, the maintenance plan, the consideration of the project as a whole, can help kind of mesh that together.
Councillor Richards.
I don't think that anyone in this room is suggesting that we do anything inauthentic here. That's not what we're after. It's not what the community wants. But I think we owe it to the structure itself to make it last as long as it possibly can.
I think there's a way to do both.
And I do think there is absolutely a way to do both.
So, sorry, Chris, go ahead.
That's okay. Thank you, Mayor. So yeah, my takeaways are authenticity and longevity. When we're considering longevity, I think a question for me is the end goal? So right now we have, my understanding would be, section 1 is being replaced. This keeps a section of the log chute in place, intact, until the full replacement happens. Understanding that when I'm talking about longevity, it's not that we're keeping section 1 into perpetuity. It's that the end goal is to get us through to the point that we replace the entire log chute.
Well, it would be nice if we could keep section 1 in longevity and add the other 2 sections to it, as opposed to having to replace that again. So, I guess I think what we're hearing here is that we want this project to go ahead if it's possible for it to be a sole source, that would allow it to proceed, for us to save some of the time that's associated with that. And, obviously there's several questions that have been raised that you're going to have to take to the engineers. And hopefully you can bring, I think I'd like us to pass a resolution about wanting to proceed, acknowledging that there are there's some information you're going to need to bring back to us, and hopefully fairly quickly.
If I may, with regards to the single sourcing, council can do that. It's well within the purchasing policy. It just has to ensure that that contractor has the knowledge of the project, and Chris would have to bring back, in accordance with our policy, a report outlining that and formal approval by council, if that's the way they
Okay.
wish to go.
And we can do that following a resolution today saying that we wish to proceed this year.
Proceed, and then
Okay.
Chris would have to bring back the details of that and potential
How that
single
fits.
source. Yeah.
Okay, right on. How's that for drafting a resolution, or would you like to bring it back to us after the break?
If you'd like, Mayor Danielson, I can read what I've crafted. And if council feels we need some adjustments, I can do so over break, and we can read that when I come back, but I'm happy to read what I have drafted so far.
Okay, let's hear it.
Be it resolved that council receives Parks, Recreation and Trails Report PRT 00326 regarding log shoot engineers review for information. And that council directs staff to move forward with the following option of replacement of section 1, the cost of 67,000 plus 40% contingency to a total of 93,800 to be funded from the log shoot reserves to be included in the 2026 budget. And that council directs staff to work with the engineers to provide a solution that will provide options to consider authenticity, longevity, single source considerations to bring back to council for consideration.
At the earliest possible opportunity.
You got that.
Can I have a mover and a seconder to that resolution? Councillor Richards, Deputy Mayor Dayu. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Look forward to more discussions. So next up is environmental business. Or maybe we should just take well, go ahead with your report, Melissa, and then take a break. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. I think we can be fairly quick with this. This is just bringing forward follow-up to my previous report about dates for household hazardous waste events. The contractor has not been able to confirm one of the dates that we had proposed, and that was the September 5th date for our Dorset event. And I'm bringing forward the proposal to change that date to August 29th, so the week before.
Thank you. Any questions or concerns about the dates being proposed? Hearing none, could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report and approve the dates that have been recommended? Deputy Mayor Dayu, Councillor Barry.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Dayu, seconded by Councillor Barry. Be it resolved that council receives environmental report EB 00326 regarding the dates for 2026 household hazardous waste collection events for information, and that council concurs with the recommendation of staff to change the date of the household hazardous waste collection event held at the Dorset Transfer Station to August 29, 2026, noting that all dates remain subject to change.
All in favor? That's carried. So we'll take a 15-minute break. Welcome back to the meeting. Next up are reports from Public Works. Good morning, Mr. Thorne.
Good morning, Mayor and Council.
Any comments or in particular that you want to make about the minutes?
No, nothing that jumps out at me. If council has any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Yeah, I guess the only other thing that we could say is that the committee is starting to ramp up a little bit and think about, what we're going to have for our first fly-in. Fingers crossed that there's no rain. Otherwise, I'd look for, if there's no questions, look for a mover and a seconder to approve the minutes of January the 15th and 23rd. Councillor Shortreed, Councillor Richards.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, seconded by Councillor Richards. Be it resolved that council receives the January 15th and January 23rd, 2026 Airport Committee meeting minutes for information.
All in favor? That's carried. So it just disappeared. Your next report. Okay, like my
okay.
agenda just disappeared from
Okay, so my next report-
No, I'll bring it back.
Is on the development program, Rural Ontario Development Program for what we're proposing for Hangar D repair project. So basically, as the report here will state, the ROD program is to secure provincial funding. One of the key factors to it is to support economical development projects. So staff have talked about this in depth, and we feel that the Hangar D project, repair project, would align with this program. So we're just looking for council's approval to apply for this funding opportunity, which provides up to a maximum of $250,000 towards a project. We're just currently waiting with our engineering firm right now to discuss and finalize the project itself. I'll be coming back to council with that in a report that will talk about the three plans that we have proposed for Hangar D and the repair and replacement of it. But yes, in that time, we would also like to apply for this funding and utilize some of that planning to potentially receive some funds to help offset the cost to repair it.
I can't tell you how happy I am to see this report, that we're, moving forward and looking for funding. Actually, all the reports that you've got today are really, really positive. So comments or questions about the funding for Hangar D? Deputy Mayor Dayu.
Thanks a lot. Adam, I just would love to hear your update on how this fits into our desire to put together an airport development plan, because in a way, it's a little bit putting the cart in front of the horse, and I appreciate there are other ways of interpreting it too, but we still don't really know towards what end all of these investment dollars are going in, and it makes me a little uncomfortable. I see the need for it, but I still feel uncomfortable with the overall costs of repairing Hangar D, and I would feel so much better if we knew towards what end. So where would you say we are at with the development of an airport development plan?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. So I did speak with the CAO prior to her leaving, and we're still working through the development plan that was brought forward to us for a funding opportunity. So, sorry, not for a funding opportunity, sorry, for us to review and bring that forward to council during budget discussions. Because it is a hefty cost to work through that proposal that they've provided us. So most of, I think, your questions will be answered during our budget discussion. As for where I see the development plan and how it reflects with Hangar D, Hangar D is an existing hangar that we used to rent out quite regularly. It was, as long as I've been here, someone who's always been in it. Unfortunately, due to the issues with the building, as a council is aware, we haven't been able to receive any renter for it or leaser for it in the last 5-6 years, unfortunately. So we knew that because of the development plan being, I want to say, pretty far out, as far as developing the properties, that is a part of the development plan. This is an opportunity to repair an existing building and get somebody back in it to start getting the revenue back into the airport. That was the idea behind us using this funding for the repair to that building. In addition to that, we have that EOI that is currently out with looking for somebody who might want to lease Hangar D as an example, or even give us maybe the opportunity to say, hey, you know what, we have 5 or 6 people that are looking for hangars of this size. You know, could we develop more hangars in the area to bring more businesses? So there's a couple pieces that are at play right now. But I think to answer the question, like I said, our budget discussion will bring forward what it's going to look like for the development plan.
A point well taken about the airport development plan. We've been waiting for a long time for that and haven't, had the success that we'd hoped for to get bids on that. Appreciate the work that you're doing. And I look forward to hearing, what you're going to bring to us. And just to add to what Adam's saying, Hangar D is an existing facility. It's an opportunity for economic development, for job creation, and it's there already, where the airport development plan is, to me, goes much beyond that. So, just look forward to seeing what kind of response we get to a funding application.
I'm very hopeful.
Me too. Any other questions about Hangar D? So could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report? Proceed. Councillor Shortreed, Councillor Richards.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, seconded by Councillor Richards. Be it resolved that Council receives Public Works Report PW 00326 regarding the request for approval to apply for the Rural Ontario Development Program Hangar D Repair Project for information, and that Council concurs with the recommendation and directs staff to prepare and submit an application to the Rural Ontario Development Program for the Hangar D Repair Project. And finally, that Council authorizes the CAO Deputy Clerk to or alternate to sign any required application or related documentation as necessary.
All in favor? That's carried. Okay, next is the Ontario Airport Capital Assistance Program and asking for us to support that program moving forward.
Yeah, so this is a really exciting opportunity for small airports like ours, where AMCO, so the Airport Management Council of Ontario, is going to put together this program that will, hopefully help us small communities with funding for aviation-related projects. And essentially, what we're looking to do is be able to advocate for them to be able to advocate on our behalf. So if council is concurring with staff's recommendation here that we would go forward to AMCO, let them know that we're on board with this, and then they would speak on our behalf in a sense of, saying that, yes, we do need this help. We do need the funding. And it's just more voices being heard at the table when the discussions are happening. And also that AMC is also looking for council support when council is out at an event or at a provincial level event, where they can also speak to, our airport and then this potential OACAP opportunity.
Questions? Oh, I think it's fabulous. I can't, I can't stress the importance of supporting your recommendation, and I think that you'll see a little bit further in our correspondence section that there'll be another voice of support for that. So could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the recommendation and approve it? Councillor Shortreed and Barry?
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, seconded by Councillor Barry. Be it resolved, the Council receives Public Works Report PW 00426 regarding the request for Ontario Airport Capital Assistance Program OACAP support for information, and that council concurs with staff's recommendation to endorse the Airport Management Council of Ontario's proposal for the establishment of Ontario Airport Capital Assistance Program and further support AMCO's efforts by formally advocating for this program at the provincial level. And finally, that council authorize staff to communicate this endorsement to AMCO and the province of Ontario as part of the ongoing provincial advocacy related to airport infrastructure funding.
All in favor? That's carried. And finally, funding for pothole prevention.
Yes.
That's important.
Again, another exciting opportunity that we have ahead of us here is, you don't see these very often, but it is greatly appreciated that we were able to apply for this funding and we received $38,000 to apply towards a pothole prevention program, if you will. The idea of this money will go towards our surface treatment. So it'll help offset some of our surface treatment that we have planned for 2026.
Any questions associated with that? Can I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report? Councilors Richards and Barry.
Moved by Councillor Richard, seconded by Councillor Berry. Be it resolved, the council receives Public Works Report PW 00526 regarding the MTO pothole prevention and repair program funding as information.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council.
And next up, fire services. Oh, before you begin, Adam, if there's any opportunity for you to attend the airport committee meeting on the 12th, that would be great. Good morning, Chief.
Morning. We're bringing forward today is the health and safety policy for the Township of Algonquin Highlands. The Health and Safety Act requires that the employer prepares a written occupational health and safety policy that's reviewed and adopted yearly. So last time ours was reviewed and adopted was February 5th, 2025. So this is just briefing on that. It will come up in the bylaw section.
Any questions for the chief about the fire and safety policy? Could I have a mover and a seconder then to receive his report? Deputy Mayor Dayu, Councillor Richards.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Dayu, seconded by Councillor Richards. Be it resolved, the council acknowledges receipt of report FD 00226 regarding the health and safety policy submitted by Michael French and dated February 5th, 2026. And the council has reviewed the health and safety policy in accordance with section 25(2)J of the Occupational Health and Safety Act, RSO 1990, and directs a bylaw be tabled to adopt the said policy.
All in favor? That's carried. And I think we all have to sign the policy. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. So nothing for now under finance business. I wonder, though, if I could ask if there's any notion about when we might receive our budget binders.
I understand they'll be ready for February 9th. I can
Okay.
confirm with the treasurer.
Thank you. Communications.
Morning.
Good morning, sir.
You you have the draft survey before you for the Oxtown Community Center, and I'm happy to take any questions that you may have about that.
Questions or comments? Deputy Mayor Dayu.
Thank you for putting this together. My only request would be, for consideration, would be, could we perhaps color the drawings where the new sections are and differentiated by what the new section is? So if it's an extension for a bathroom, it's green.
Yeah.
If it's a ramp, it's blue, whatever it might be.
Understood, absolutely.
That would be great.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, I wonder if, when you buy a new computer or a car and you go online and you see, here's option A, option B, option C, this is what they all include, yes or no, with checks and crosses. I wonder if something like that would be helpful to just to really understand the differences between these three options, because on the surface, they're not too dissimilar.
Okay.
So something that would just help people to really differentiate between them would be amazing.
Sure, do that.
Yeah, I like the idea about the different colors and, you know, makes it
Makes
really
sense.
clear. Counselor Barry?
I don't want to frame the survey, however I want to frame the survey. That council, I think from our previous discussion, the walkway was the one with the ramp at the back of the building was our preferred um design.
Mhm.
And I just wonder if that should be listed just as why council is in support of that. Not that we don't want to hear from the community, but I just think that there was considerable consideration about that at the last meeting that we had this discussion. I think some of it was around, you know, accessibility, keeping the facility looking as close to what it is. That type of thing. I just wonder what council thinks about that. I'm willing to go with whatever the community wants, but I do think that
No, it's not a bad suggestion, you know, I mean, because it does provide a little bit greater understanding about, you know, why we're leaning in that direction. And, you know, give them some, sort of food for thought about, you know, what they should be thinking about. Counselor Shortreed?
Yeah, I agree, because we asked questions and understood more because of the questions we asked. So even if it's bullet point, the reasons council likes whichever one it was is because
Because,
of this, and this.
well, and I definitely like making the points about accessibility and in keeping with the, you know, the look of the building overall. Deputy Mayor Dayan?
Something no doubt you've thought of. With your question, your final question, do you have any other suggestions for how accessibility improvements can be made? How do we avoid getting suggestions back on things that we simply couldn't do because accessibility, you know, there are standards that we have to maintain. You know, if someone says, oh, you know, that bathroom, it's far too big, you could remove a foot off the front end. Well, no, we can't.
And
So
we're asking for suggestions that we are then not going to act upon.
well, that's right. Or, you know, oh, that ramp could be shorter for sure. Well, actually, no, it can't because of the slope. And I wonder how we balance that.
You basically can't. I mean, it's parameters. It's an open-ended question. People are going to respond how they respond. I've included that as a matter of course, as we did with the Christmas tree survey, added the sort of open-ended question at the end. We could remove that completely if you would like, and just stick to the three design options and call it a day.
And the explanation about council's, you know, thought
Yeah,
process.
what I'm going to do there is include that in the preamble.
Okay.
In the preamble,
yeah,
it's
right on.
going to include that this is council's preference and why. But we can take that second question out completely and just keep it to the design options.
Sound good? Deputy Mayor Dayan?
Yeah, I think that would work, but maybe there's some language we could put earlier up saying, you know, accessibility, it's a science, there are standards. So, you know, this isn't a flexible thing that we can manipulate so that people don't know that we're not trying to exclude them.
Yep.
Or change the second question to be, you know, in addition to these three standard approved models, is there anything else that you could think of that would make the community center more accessible, sort of in addition to the model that we choose?
I think you're going back to asking a question that we may not respond to.
No, I don't think so. It's a nuance. It's, you know, here it says, if you have any additional suggestions for accessibility improvements. Well, we don't want them to make suggestions on those models, but if there is anything in addition to the model that's chosen that would encourage accessibility, you know, he could work with words like that if, you know, it's council's pleasure.
I see your wheels turning. I'll go to Councillor Barry.
I don't want to remove the question about if you have additional suggestions. I do like whenever you're given a survey, the option to have additional input. But I think you could have, if you have any additional suggestions at the Oxtongue Lake Community Center, just leave it open. I don't think we need to specifically ask for recommendations for accessibility improvements.
Well, or if you are asking for any other suggestions about accessibility, sort of in part of your preamble, keeping in mind that there are standards that we must
The
Neat.
other thing I could do in the preamble is link to the accessibility section on the website. So people can look at our policies and whatnot and have that in the
Mhm.
preamble as well, like embed that,
Sure, and if they want to go there, they can, and
embed that link. And I was also going to include a link to Adam's initial staff report and then to the overall collection of drawings as well.
Counselor Shortreed, did you have any comment you wanted to make? Okay. Any other questions, comments?
So just for my clarity, we're keeping the second question, but we're going to adjust the language somewhat. Is that
Yeah. Yeah.
okay? Okay.
So I guess the resolution would be to proceed with the survey as amended. Mover and a seconder. Counselor Barry and Shortreed.
Moved by Councillor Berry, seconded by Councillor Shortreed. Be it resolved, the council receives communications report COM 00126 for information, and the council directs staff to proceed with the publication of the survey as amended on the Let's Connect Algonquin Highlands website.
All in favor? That's carried.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chad.
Thank you.
Okay, on to administration business and the donations that have been made to the Dorset Museum. I just want to say how much council appreciates, and on behalf of both the committee as well, how much we appreciate the support of these foundations. So I'm assuming that we would write letters of thank you to both. So what have you got for a resolution?
Would you like me to read the full resolution? Mayor?
Sure, if you would.
Okay, yeah. Be it resolved that council receives correspondence from the Goring family and the Larson Foundation, and that council expresses its sincere appreciation to the Goring family for the donation of $1,000 for Friends of the Dorset Heritage Museum special projects, including the pavilion, and that council also expresses its sincere appreciation to the Larson Foundation for the donation of $15,000 for the Dorset Heritage Museum special projects, including pavilion, and finally, that council directs letters be sent to both the Goring family and the Larson Foundation for their generous donations.
Sound good? Mover and a seconder. Councillor Shortreed, Deputy Mayor Dayu. All in favor? That's carried. Over to, I'm not sure which one of you want to speak to this. Over to our acting CAO on lame duck information.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As Council is aware, we have an upcoming election in October this year. And in previous years, Council has passed a bylaw delegating certain restricted acts that Council will encounter or may encounter if they do become lame duck between two periods during the election. The restricted acts are listed there. And should council support it, staff will bring back a bylaw delegating the authority to the CAO to act if required during those time periods.
The only question that I had about that is if something came up and it was something that we couldn't deal with, that it would go to the CAO, would the CAO advise us of whatever was taking place?
Should council wish, we can put a clause in the bylaw that the CAO will report out any acts that they did have to act on.
Yeah, I would think that would be important for our information. I mean, there may be,
Just a final report following any actions that were taken.
right. And the only concern that I had about this report was whether or not, I was kind of looking at the dates and trying to figure out whether or not this would have an impact on our recruitment activity that we're going to be doing going forward, but apparently we're good to go in that regard. So questions? I guess with that addition to the motion, could I have a mover and a seconder? Councillors Shortreed and Richards. So it would be as amended.
Mayor Danielson, just to clarify, we're gonna do the bylaw next meeting, so we won't have to do it as amended in the resolution, because staff will just make the amendment to the bylaw and.
Oh, okay.
If that's supportive of you.
So we're just receiving this.
Yeah, I'll read it.
Okay.
Moved by Councillor Short-Reed, seconded by Councillor Richards, be it resolved that council receives report CO 00126 regarding restricted acts after nomination date, and that council hereby concurs with the recommendation to delegate its powers under section 275(3) of the Municipal Act 2001 to the Chief Administrative Officer, and directs that the delegation bylaw be brought forward at the next regular meeting of council.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Next is planning business. The first item is the membership for the Committee of Adjustment. I haven't had anyone ask for a change or, to be involved in the Committee of Adjustment to date. So what I would recommend is that the existing members of council continue on for the rest of the term, if council are in agreement with that, and that would be myself and Councillor Richards. Could I have a mover and a seconder then to that regard? Councillor Short-Reed, Deputy Mayor Dayu. And I have, I'm hoping that it's in your plans that for the new term, that whoever is on the Committee of Adjustment would get some detailed training.
Yes, that's something the committee has requested. It may be something I bring forward both to council and the committee, that perhaps that training take place after a new committee is formed following the election.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, at this point in time, I think that's the best direction to take. I might suggest that, because one of the training sessions we took was kind of an online thing, and just sort of, you just dealt with it online. I think, for the new committee next year coming forward, it might be an idea to have, like a in-person session. I'm not sure if that's something that you can organize with the Ontario Association of Committees of Adjustment, or whether there's another organization that you might recommend.
Certainly, that's something I can look into further.
Okay. It's interesting. I know that the last time that we had a session, a person-to-person session, it was very clear that the Committee of Adjustment is a challenging committee, and there's so much gray area that it really takes some thinking, and it's a challenge. Anyway, do we have a mover and a seconder?
I do have a mover, just.
Okay.
Yep. Moved by Councillor Short-Reed, seconded by Deputy Mayor Dayu. Be it resolved, the council receives report PL 01526 regarding the Committee of Adjustment membership appointments for information. The council appoints Mayor Danielson and Councillor Richards as members of the Committee of Adjustment.
All in favor? That's carried. Any highlights in your planning department update?
Just the one thing I was going to note was with respect to an Ontario Land Tribunal for a minor variance application. So that was originally scheduled for one day, and I just finished up with that yesterday, and it turned into a 3.5-day hearing. So just that for council information.
Something that you needed to maintain patience for and work your way through.
It was an interesting one.
And levels of success, or can you speak to that?
No, so the member has received all the information, and they'll be issuing a decision later on. There's no exact timeline on when that would be received, but we'll certainly pass that on to council once it is.
Thank you. Councillor Richards.
I'm just wondering about the short-term rental licenses. Do you know how many short-term rental licenses we have issued in Algonquin Highlands? And have there been any refusals at all?
The total number, I'm sorry, I don't have that in my report. I will include that moving forward for council information, but refusal, yes, there have been at least one refusal. We have not had any appealed to the county appeal body yet. But should any be received, we would notify council of that.
Go ahead.
And on the short-term rental licenses, I'm hearing from other municipalities, because I'm on that appeals committee, that there are intended changes coming forward, And I'm wondering if you're working on doing the same for us.
Yes, so myself and Rob have been keeping a running list of suggested changes that we'll bring forward to council. Most likely this year. I'm not sure exactly timing wise, but there are a few things that we've noticed there could be improvements made to it.
Deputy Mayor Dayu?
Further to Councillor Richard's question about how many refusals, is it possible to even have a back of the envelope estimation of how many inquiries there have been? Hey, I might want to do a short-term rental that is then not turned into a short-term rental. I do know there are some people who used to rent who no longer find it feasible to rent because of the short-term rental legislation. And I wonder if there's any way that that's a stat that we could gauge, even vaguely.
I mean, very rough estimate off the top of my head, I would say certainly less than 10, I would think. Yeah.
Any idea where the MAT tax revenue, or has there been any MAT tax revenue as yet? Or when we?
Yes, I believe that'll be brought up in budget, but I believe it was north of $40,000 if I'm not mistaken.
That's good to know, because there have been, over the course of discussions on various items, there's been a suggestion that we use it for, any number of projects. And so it's good that we'll be getting a report on that. Go ahead, Councillor Richards.
Also in those numbers, a couple things. I was wondering if we could know how many of the short-term rentals are water access only properties versus regular. And my mind just went. The what was it? I forgot my question entirely.
While you're thinking about that, we might want to have a consideration for the question of whether or not the township is responsible for providing parking for water access only properties, that have short-term rentals on them. Because I think that was something that came up at the last meeting or in a discussion that we've had, that there's some responsibility on our part, and whether there should be. I mean, that would be one of the things that if we're looking at making changes to the bylaw, that we might think about or confirm one way or the other. Go ahead.
Yeah, we did have that discussion actually when we brought in the short-term rental bylaw about water access only properties. And we didn't want to hinder those properties from being able to continue to operate because of them not having parking.
Right.
So we did decide that municipal parking was allowed. Maybe we want to give consideration to an additional fee for that when we're allowing for that. But even that is somewhat debatable, given that a water access only property typically rents for lower than a road access property as a short-term rental. And we don't want to hinder people. That's not the point, right? So I just remembered my other question on bylaw enforcement. So maybe more for Greg than you, but I noticed in other municipalities, they seem to be actively looking for short-term rentals that are operating without a license. And I wonder if we're doing the same.
Yes, we are. So the Granicus program we have, it scours the internet for all these different sites, not just Airbnb, but other more obscure sites where these properties would be rented, and it displays that information on a map for us, and it'll show whether it's in compliance or not. So just as recently as this morning, myself and Rob were going over a list of properties that have been identified as non-compliant, and we're following up with them.
Go ahead.
Can I ask a follow-up to that? Do you have an idea of how many properties those would be?
On the list this morning, I believe it was less than 20.
And there have been some questions raised about, why isn't there a greater level of flexibility in the process, and and why do I have to stick to the rules of this bylaw? And I mean, our bylaws are our bylaws, and they're all fluid documents that have ongoing reviews. So, I think that, the kind of questions that have been raised, and I'm sure that, you can tell us about at some point, we'll need to consider, when we're looking at the short term or, when council is looking at the short-term rental bylaw going forward. I think we knew right off the bat that we would probably be making some changes over time.
Mhm.
Any other comments or questions about the planning update? Mover and a seconder to receive it. Councillor Richards, Councillor Barry.
Moved by Councillor Richards, seconded by Councillor Barry. Be it resolved that council acknowledges receipt of report PL 01426 submitted by Sean O'Callahan and dated February 5th, 2026 for information.
All in favor? That's carried. So the next item is a proposed shore road closing on Beach Lake by McInnes.
Thank you. Yes, council recall dealing with this the previous council meeting with respect to receiving a letter of support from a neighboring property owner. So we've since received that. So we're bringing this application forward for council consideration to pass a bylaw to close the shore road allowance in front of this property.
Any questions or comments? So mover and a seconder to receive the report. Councillor Short-Reed, Deputy Mayor Dayu.
Moved by Councillor Short-Reed, seconded by Deputy Mayor Dayu. Be it resolved, the council acknowledges receipt of report PL 01326 regarding the proposed shore road allowance closing fronting property located at part of Lot 17 Concession 4, Geographic Township of Stanhope, McGinnis Beach Lake, and that council deems the said shore road allowance to be surplus and concurs with the recommendation made in the said report and directs the bylaw to stop, up, close, and convey the said shore road allowance to be tabled for further consideration.
All in favor? That's carried. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
So under external board meetings, anything on the Dorset Partnership or the Health Hub?
Yes, we are scheduling a meeting for next month, date to be determined, but it's in process.
Well, we look forward to hearing the results of those meetings. Anything up on Upper Trent Water Management or Muskoka Watershed?
No, nothing to update at this time on all three of them.
Anything on the, I'm sorry if I missed this, anything on the Hallstock group?
Not yet, no.
Not yet. Look forward to that. We did, the county did have a recent OPP detachment board meeting. And I'm not sure that there is anything of substance to bring to you. Now, we did get statistics for the overall county and for the municipality, and I'm not sure if you receive statistics from the OPP for Algonquin Highlands, or if that's something that I need to forward.
Yes, no, I have not.
Okay. Overall, crime seems to be down somewhat, which is nice to hear. And I will, we've got copies of statistics for Algonquin Highlands, so I will forward them on to you. And I think that's about it for OPP. Anything on the library board that you'd like to bring forward?
Nothing on library or community safety and well-being. There is a small update on Muskoka River watershed communications, however. Just that things are progressing as usual, and currently our water snow equivalents are at about 116% of average for this time of year. So just a little bit more water within the snowpack than usual, but nothing untoward.
Well, I personally, I'm not keen on praying for more snow. But I think if a little bit more snow and some, rainfall might help us, because I think we're looking forward to or what I'm hearing is a very dry season coming up. So hopefully that, we get a little bit of help in that regard, please. I'm not sure that there's anything to report specifically about county council. The last meeting that we had was a Zoom meeting that lasted that long. So really nothing to report unless anybody's got any questions. Okay, nothing under general business. Are there any notices of motion? Hearing none. I think that under the correspondence listing, there was one recommended for support. If you'd like to speak to that?
Yes, Mayor Dennison, there was. Deputy Mayor Dayu has moved the Town of Fort Francis OACAP resolution. So it's in conjunction with Adam's report that he presented. It's on the same topic. So I have drafted, we have two resolutions, one to receive the correspondence for today. And then the next resolution is the resolution of Fort Francis. And that the copy of that resolution be sent to the town of Fort Francis, the Ministry of Transportation, and AMCO, as Adam spoke about today.
Okay, yeah, no, I see absolutely no harm in adding further support to that. So could I have a mover and a seconder? Oh, I'm sorry, did you have a question?
No, that's great. Thanks very much. In our communication, is there space to say, also as a municipal airport owner, we further endorse just that our support is not out of the blue, that we also very much have a stake in it.
So we can amend the resolution to include that? Or maybe you want to read? Well, let's go with the first resolution. Could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the correspondence listing? Then we can- Deputy Mayor Dayu, Councillor Shortreed.
Okay, moved by Deputy Mayor Dayu, seconded by Councillor Shortreed. Be it resolved that Council receives the February 5th, 2026 correspondence listing for information.
All in favor? That's carried.
Okay, so in this resolution, so if council's supportive, we can amend this one, or we can in Adam's resolution, we did direct staff to communicate our resolution to AMCO as well. So just so I capture this right, are we wanting to add to Fort Francis's?
I think that the comment that Deputy Mayor Dayu is making that as a small airport owner operator,
Okay,
we support, just so that it's acknowledged that we're not just any community that's supporting their, their request, but that we're involved as well.
okay.
So that could go at the beginning of the resolution?
Yeah, can I, if you don't mind, can I just have a minute just to?
Yes, absolutely.
I think I'm ready, Mayor Dennison.
Okay, if you want to read the resolution.
Sure. Do we have a mover and seconder for this one? Yeah.
Sure.
Mover, yeah, so I just need a.
Every once in a while, it's nice to hear the resolution first.
Sure.
But in this case, I think we know what's coming. So moved by Deputy Mayor Dayu, seconded by Councillor Shortreed.
Okay. Okay. Moved by Deputy Mayor Dayu, seconded by Councillor Shortreed. Be it resolved that the Council of the Township of Algonquin Highlands as a rural municipal airport owner supports the Town of Fort Francis resolution that was passed on January 12, 2026, stating the following. Whereas the Fort Francis Municipal Airport serves the town of Fort Francis, the District of Rainy River, and the First Nation communities of Southern Treaty Number 3 region, and whereas the Fort Francis Municipal Airport plays a vital role in supporting medevac flights, wildfire response operations, business travel, tourism, and the movement of essential goods for the entire region. And whereas the termination of scheduled passenger air service in May of 2024 resulted in the loss of eligibility to funding through the Federal Airport Capital Assistance Program, and whereas whereas other provinces, including British Columbia, Saskatchewan, Alberta, have recognized the importance of regional airports by establishing dedicated provincial funding programs, and Ontario currently does not. And whereas maintaining aging airport infrastructure has become increasingly difficult without predictable provincial support, and whereas regional airports serve broader provincial and regional interests and municipalities cannot shoulder the financial burden alone. Therefore, be it resolved that the Council of the Town of Fort Frances hereby calls upon the Province of Ontario to establish an Ontario Airport Capital Assistance Program to provide dedicated annual funding for small and regional airports and ensure eligibility for a broad range of capital projects, including safety upgrades, equipment replacement, and runway maintenance, and engage municipalities in program design, ensuring local needs and realities are reflected in funding criteria, and recognize the essential role of airports in medevac and emergency services, especially in remote and northern communities. And finally, that a copy of the following resolution be sent to the Town of Fort Frances, the Ministry of Transportation, and Airport Management Council of Ontario.
All in favor? That's carried. You can take a breath after reading that resolution. Okay, we had no closed session, so a mover and a seconder to adopt the bylaws. Councillor Shortreed, Councillor Richards.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, seconded by Councillor Richards. Be it resolved that the following bylaws be received and read a first time, considered read a second and third time, and finally passed with a corporate seal affixed. 2026-15 to adopt a health and safety policy. 2026 to stop, up, close, convey the abutting property owners part of the original Shore Road Allowance, McGuinness.
All in favor? That's carried. A mover and a seconder for the confirmatory bylaw. Councillor Shortreed, Councillor Berry.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, seconded by Councillor Berry. Be it resolved that bylaw 2026-17 to confirm the proceedings of council held during its February 5th, 2026 regular meeting be received and read a first time, considered read a second and third time, and finally passed with a corporate seal affixed.
All in favor? That's carried. Finally, a motion to adjourn. Councillor Berry, Councillor Shortreed.
Moved by Councillor Berry, seconded by Councillor Shortreed. Be it resolved that the meeting is hereby adjourned at 11:09 a.m.
All in favor? That's carried.